From rural Canada to the stunning Adenauer Forst, welcome to the Eifel region of Germany. Welcome to round 3 of the eGP Pilot Series. And welcome to a circuit that strikes fear into the hearts of drivers when they hear its name. Welcome to the Nurburgring. My name is Taylor Mills. Alongside me is Amity Pulsatrix, and we will be live from Lights to Flag here on ABN. Famed for the fabled Nurburgring 24-hour, host of multiple Formula One Grand Prix and World Endurance Championship events, tonight we go racing on the Grand Prix Strecker. This track replaced the Sudschleife for 1984 and was further modified in 2001 to its current 5.14 kilometer layout that we know and love today. 15 turns, 9 to the right and 6 to the left are a beautiful selection of flowing corners like the flat-out Schumacher S, the Mercedes-Benz Arena, and the Bilstein Curve. This track is perfect for sports car racing, with plenty of overtaking opportunities down at Yokohama, Goodyear Kara, Ravenel Curve, and Hyundai N Curve at the end of the lap. The constant switchback nature means it will be side by side all race long. I know I've said it quite a few times on these broadcasts, but the Nurburgring Grand Prix is one of the most underrated tracks on the iRacing service, and one of my favorites of all time. I've actually had the pleasure of lapping the Nordschleife a few times myself, which is always a fun experience. But Amity, what more can you tell us about this legendary circuit?
I mean, you're absolutely correct in saying that this circuit is tremendously underrated, and a lot of people are probably thinking, well, it's the Nürburgring. Of course it isn't. But when you think about it, when people think about Nürburgring, they think about the Nordschleife, the street course that winds all the way around the German hills. But the Nurburgring GP itself, the closed circuit alone, is one of the best racing facilities that you can have the pleasure of driving. And here we are driving it today for the eGP of Germany for the Platinum eGP Pilot Series, round number 3, as we see LMP2 and GT3 action take the stage here. 2 weeks ago we were in, as mentioned earlier, Canada, the rural hills of Canada, over by Bowmanville, I believe, Ontario, with the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And there we saw a mixed condition race. A lot of drivers struggling with that, struggling with getting the cars woed up and around corners as the rain started meddling with the situation. But from what I'm hearing, the forecast is a little bit more stable for this race here today at the Nurburgring GP.
Yeah, of course, weather rearing its ugly head 2 weeks ago at Mosport, but nothing to report on the weather front for this week. It will be dry end to end, unless the forecast decides to change between qualifying and the race. But of course, it was a dramatic event from Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. We had a dominant victory from Luke Smith, as we had in Spa, and a great race being ran by Miguel Almeida as well. But the rain itself throwing up so much, I don't know, just so much uncertainty and so much stress for the drivers, clearly. So many people going off down at turn 5. We had that massive crash as David Soranzo managed to cut the track and take out one of the GT3s mid-corner. But there are a lot of slates to be wiped clean coming into the Nürburgring. Lots of drivers that are looking to make an impression tonight. One of those, of course, being Jan Kurbs, who has retired from both races so far this season. There seems to be a bit of a curse on Writer Engineer at the moment, and they don't seem to be able to really pull a race together in either the eGP or the Platinum Endurance Championship. So tonight at their home circuit may be an opportunity to turn things around as we do begin qualifying. The sun is starting to rise. We can actually see the cars out there on track rather than the 2 glowing headlights at the front of most of these cars. It takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of skill, and a lot of just getting into the rhythm to really figure this track out. It's a track that has a nice flow to it, a nice rhythm that you can settle into, but with only an outlap and 4 push laps, you don't have much time to find and get into that rhythm, as we're just following Kevin Peters through the blisteringly quick Michael Schumacher S. A beautiful set of corners are certainly going to be a pinch point tonight, and then hard on the brakes into what is a nice, fast and flowing chicane. Otherwise on the circuit, it will be the fastest chicane on the track, but thankfully for tonight's event, we are not running the GP chicane. We are going all the way down to the bottom through the fast left-right sweeper at, let's see, I looked it up before this. It's the Vidal chicane, just to remind myself of that one, and through to the final corner on board Kevin Peters. So not much time to get it right, not much time to figure it out. So Amity, why don't you take us to a lap with one of the drivers and let's try and get into the mindset of what they're doing right now.
Absolutely. So heading into turn one, you could see lots of braking power put into the car to get the car wound up for a very hard right-hand hairpin going over the hill, off center, off camber into turn two. Heading into turn 3 and 4, going to be a nasty switchback that requires a lot of patience on the throttle in order to be able to put the power down. Right into turn 5 here. This is a very small kink towards the right, but it is still a turn 5 into turn 6. A left-hander going downhill, and now a right-hander, hard camber to help the car grip up through turn number 7. Another kink to the left, but this one not so much, so it's not necessarily labeled a corner. The Germans being a little bit finicky with their corner names and numbers. But here, heading into turn 8, a long hairpin, and on more patience on the throttle. You think you want to get on the throttle earlier than you actually want to. The Schumacher S, absolutely famous for a lot of situations in Formula One where many incidents had occurred in side-by-side racing. Through turn 8 and 9 were the Schumacher S, so we're into turn 10 and 11. And I believe it was Kevin Peters actually getting a little bit of the gravel, so this time may not count. Going into turn 10 and now 11 and 12, this S-curve here, the much faster chicane, the much more forgiving chicane compared to the very tight GP, and then the final corner, the right-hand hairpin, and they're going to be booking it all the way out, trying to accentuate that exit speed to be able to get to the line. And we're going to be seeing a time from Kevin Peters, if it is valid, and I do believe it is. It is a 43.75 for the LMP2s to try and top.
Track limits always tricky here at the Nurburgring Grand Prix Strecker. The old style of track limits detection being used, so it's based on the center of your car, not where your tires are placed. The inside of that second part of the Vidal chicane is it's an easy place to pick up incident points because you gain so much time for basically cutting it completely, which you can do to a certain extent. But as soon as you get the middle of your car over any part of the AstroTurf on the inside, you're going to pick up an incident point, and that's going to invalidate your lap, as we're just following last week's race winner and pole sitter, and your race winner and pole sitter from Spa, looking to make it 3 of 3 coming into tonight. Of course, we've gone Europe over to America, back over to Europe again, getting a little bit further away from a home race for Luke Smith. But he's a driver who's proven himself competent on 2 different types of circuits so far. A proper grade 1 racing facility in the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and then the much sketchier, sketchy is an unfair word, it's Motorsport is a fantastic circuit. And of course, dominant over there with the tricky weather, but now trying to make it happen once again back on one of these grade 1 circuits over here in Europe. He's doing a pretty good job of it so far, as he is currently in provisional pole position. Plenty of time still to go in the session though. 4 laps and 30 minutes. In fact, no, it's not even 4 laps. It's as many laps as you can get in half an hour, I believe. It's something I definitely should have checked before the broadcast. It is Maxime Dumoulin, who was one of the drivers embroiled in a bit of a battle all race last week. We saw a bit of a fight going on between them and, I believe, was it Jeremy Debova? These two just seeming to end up on track side by side, nose to tail for the entire duration of that race.
Fantastic race. Go. Canadian Tire Motorsports Park as we take a look at Maxime Dumoulin, who is currently second in the qualifying times, getting pipped by Jan Kobs, and now Philip Spess, and well, pretty much everybody seems to be going quite a lot faster at this current point in time. Maxime Dumoulin improving just a little bit, being able to hold on to 20th overall. Take a look at Jan Kobs in the Ford Mustang for Ryder Engineering Esports.
The only bit of blue on that car, of course, being the one in the banner. The huge window banner on that Ford Mustang GT3.
Does tend to cut in quite a lot into the driver vision, so on tracks with a lot of elevation change, that can cause a bit of a visibility issue, and we might have seen quite a lot of that at CTMP. Very hilly circuit over there. Of course, Nurburgring GP not completely flat either, but the extreme elevation changes you expect at CTMP were extreme enough where a lot of the track would be just cut off from your view because of that banner. But here, not quite as much of an issue as we see on curves going down the long back straight into the chicane, hard through it, so fast through it, just inches section. And through the final corner, just getting that back end just a little bit loose, doing that four-wheel drift out of the corner. That's how you know the car's going fast.
Yeah, across the line he comes then. Is it going to be any improvement from Jan Kobs as we wait for that time to settle in? It is. He moves up to second place. Retains second place even, a 1 minute 55 points. Just trying to peek a look at what it was, a 54 even, 0.7. So looking at that, I don't think that was valid because it hasn't actually moved them up the boards. Last week's winner in GT3 then, Miguel Almeida, who in all of that wet weather decided not to change his tires. Into the pits he comes. I assume that's going to be the end of his run. It is good enough for provisional pole position so far, but I almost don't want to say surprise, but a provisional second place for Jan Kobs so far. We mentioned how he hasn't really pulled off much of the season, getting involved in 2 incidents in both of the first rounds of the race, both of the first races of the championship, as David Soranzo coming out of Hyundai N curve, crossing the start-finish line. Is it going to be an improvement for him, or is he just starting a lap? It looks like, yeah, no, he is just starting a lap. So flying lap coming in for David Soranzo here, his last of the session, we can only assume. Clearly he is giving it everything, very on edge through those corners. And back to your provisional pole sitter, Luke Smith, out there on a fresh set of tires. We saw him reset earlier on in the session, took the time to get those tires warmed up, get his eye in, only managing 1 lap on that first set, but then resetting to get some fresh rubber on that car. We know it's typically lap 3 when these tires really get in the window. And from what I could tell, it does look like Luke Smith is improving, but very, very wide through turn number 10-11 up there. It's going to be lost time, and he's going to give up on that run as he's almost coming under a little bit of pressure from series newcomer Nicholas Gesner, who is just entering for this race. Luke Tunerton then for Unlucky Luke Racing. Have a guess where that name comes from. Currently 5th in class. Is not going to get the opportunity to improve, as it looks like we're going to move on to the race. An hour and 30 minutes of racing. So let's have a look down the grid and see how everyone's going to line up for tonight's race. In pole position in GTP then, it is going to be your usual suspect of Luke Smith, who will lead the field to the green flag, alongside Nicholas Gesner for Ryder Engineering, 0.4 of a second between those two. Nelson Clemente is on that second row for Rubis G by NGC, alongside David Soranzo in P4. Luke Tunerton for Unlucky Luke Racing, who we were just following at the end of the session there, lines up 5th alongside Dimitri Dennis for Fuel Vine Racing. Matthew Luke for Fury Simsport is 7th, and finishing off the 4th row of the grid is Killian Clace for Eagle Speed Academy Esports. Craig Townsend for Arc Motorsports and Kevin Peters for Slippers Race. We're scrolling all the way back
I apologize. It skipped a little bit further ahead than I was expecting.
Rene Valesinas will line up alongside Paul Taylor, of course, one of the Brits that we saw fighting for the top places last week. Kevin Peters for Slippers Racing Team will be starting alongside Michael Port in that Ignium Motorsports car. So disappointing qualifying session for both of them. Craig Townsend had some good pace in practice, but wasn't able to transform that into qualifying pace as he lines up 13th for Arc Motorsport alongside Falco van Rijssel, a name that I still don't know how to pronounce, for Pacemakers Venom in P14. Row 8 of the grid is made up by Thomas Burling for Jib Racing, who we've seen go for some funky strategies tonight, but hopefully it should be a lot more simple. Chris Van Gux, who went for a ride on pit exit last week, is hoping to not do the same today, but he's going to have quite the job of it from down in 16th. William Alcala III for Twin Turn Sim Sports Aurora will line up on row 9 of the grid alongside the sister Slippers Racing Team car of Alex Deiter. And we're going to have to rush the GT3 field. Miguel Almeida and Jan Kurbs line up on the front row together. Federico Faria and Maxime Dumoulin, who were involved in some fights last week, are on row 2. Philip Spess and Diogo Teodoro are on row 3. Jeremy DeBova, Diego DE for Vortex will line up on row 4. Anthony Coranta, who was involved in that lap 1 incident last week, lines up P9 in class with Gus Franken in P10. And rounding out the short GT3 field this week is Navarro Debova in that sister Vortex car for the Vortex Junior squad. So around the final corner we come. Luke Smith in that number 55, Project Valorous Delara P217 LMP2 once again will lead the field to green. It is 90 minutes of racing that are ahead of us here at the Nurburgring Grand Prix Stracker. Luke Smith entering that green flag zone. Waiting, everyone's shuffling around, and we are away. We have the Writer Engineering car moving off to block positions straight away as we are 4 wide down into turn 1 already. Almost contact in the middle of the pack there, as I think that was Nicholas Gesner almost getting involved as they continue to stay 2-3 wide through into the Mercedes-Benz arena as the GT3 cars are also getting underway, and that's going to be a big slide in the middle of the pack there for Luke Tunizin, who's going to lose a couple of positions as we shuffle down into turn 1 for the GT3 field. It's going to be Jan Kurbs, who doesn't quite manage to hold on to P3, and he's been spun. Contact between Federico Faria and Jan Kurbs, I believe, is going to send his Mustang GT3 into a spin, and he's going to be shuffled all the way to the back of the field. A terrible season for Kurbs continues as Miguel Almeida stays at the front of the GT3s.
And just as we mentioned that, there was another incident with the LMP2s. David Sorenzo having a bit of an incident over at the long right-hand hairpin there, turn 9, I believe it was. Bit of a slip and slide for the LMP2s, but currently they're getting a little bit more organized. Still some double file racing here and there through the LMP2 cars as we see a little bit of a battle going on between a couple cars here. We're taking a look at Paul Taylor in that number 10, that very brightly colored fin on the LMP2. Going too wide into the chicane, but everybody thinks better of it. Tries to make it work a little bit as an Eagle Motorsports car. Eagle Esports. I believe that was Killian Claes having a bit of an issue going a little bit too far wide through the chicane.
Yeah, the chicane is a spot where you can make up a lot of time, but Paul Taylor looking to pounce on Killian Claes as Craig Townsend, all in the slipstream of Claes, is going to try and make something work around the outside. It almost sticks, but he's just got Killian Claes in front of him, blocking the way. But Paul Taylor looking for a line around the outside of turn 2. Defends from Craig Townsend, who is now on the inside for 3 as it switches back to the inside for Taylor into turn 4 as they continue to go side by side. We said this would happen, but now Michael Poole is getting involved in this fight for P9 in classes all this time. Killian Claes is running a little bit away into the distance as he starts to chase down Kevin Peters, but Paul Taylor and Craig Townsend finally slot into a single file line. Craig Townsend making up that position, and it's P9 for the 26 car.
Fantastic battle from the two of them. Nurburgring GP is one of those tracks that just incentivizes side-by-side driving and really enhances it, and we saw a perfect example of that right here in the LMP2 cars. But it's a very narrow margin of error. You don't have a whole lot of space to be able to try and make a pass on the outside or the inside. You don't have a lot of space to give, and mistakes can happen at any point in the next 90 minutes of this race.
Yeah, plenty of time still to go to recover any lost positions from the start of this event. Jan Kurb's already up to P9 in class after that lap 1 spin, but Chris Van Gucht coming under plenty of pressure from Thomas Berlin down into the final corner of the track. And here comes one of the longest flat out sections on the circuit. Berlin tucks all up in the slipstream of the Belgian. Is Berlin going to go for a move into 1? He doesn't have a look and thinks better of it this time by, but he's going to have plenty more opportunities, as that's Paul Taylor just off in the background further up the road there. Berlin is going to stay tucked right in, but William Alcala is just behind him and looking for any opportunity to pounce. Remember, any side-by-side racing through here is going to slow down both drivers, and eventually some sort of shift and momentum is going to change into one of them and open up a gap for someone else to slide into. So when you are racing side by side, you're not only on the attack, you are on the defense, as Chris Van Gucht on that defense is looking to start to run off into the distance a bit.
Mr. Car, Killian Clay is the Eagle Speed Academy eSport number 88 car. Choppy audio for some reason. I apologize for the audio issues. I'm not quite sure why they're occurring. If those can mitigate it somehow. I'm hoping that that's not actually coming through on the broadcast, because it is very annoying. But, moment, LMP2 seems to have dialed things back a little bit, got into a single file row, kind of started minding their manners in a sense. Audio seems to work itself out finally. Are going through the chicane, and I think that's actually Craig Townsend that's going to be popping into the pits for some reason.
Yeah, a couple of reasons that could be for a little bit of damage, or perhaps he only put qualifying fuel in the car. It does make sense. He's gone 3 laps. So maybe a setup error for the ARC Motorsports team, not quite putting the race setup on, as that's going to take Craig Townsend right out of this race very early on. Of course, it's going to spit him out into a little bit of clean air, so perhaps opportunity to make up a little bit of race time, but that is a devastating moment for that team, as they'll really need to start on that recovery. Maxime Dumoulin then in the slipstream of Jada Vlaming, coming down into the Vidal chicane. Not an overtaking opportunity through this version of the chicane. It is way too fast, but as long as the Simitok Sensations driver can stay in that slipstream, he's going to get some speed built and built and built on this start-finish straight. And turn 1 could open up an opportunity for him, as Federico Faria comes across the line to set the fastest lap of the race, tucked in the slipstream of Miguel Almeida, who of course won the race last time out in a dominant fashion, after I believe it was Federico Faria who was taken out when David Sorranto lost control of the car through turn 4 and ended up 90 degrees to the racing line through turn 5. As Almeida just holding on to that position from their Ferrari driving teammate at the moment. Everything seeming to settle down into a bit of a rhythm for now, but even then, Maxime Dumoulin is looking for an opportunity to get past Jada Dan Vlaming, as there's not really going to be one down into turn 7. But again, he's got a nice long straight downhill slipstream coming into full effect. Is Dumoulin going to have a look to the inside into the hairpin? He doesn't, but slightly different racing line through the corner is going to concertina both of these drivers up, as they're going back up the hill now through the Schumacher S, with a couple more overtaking opportunities to come this lap.
Very close racing here. And as I mentioned, that closer still in the LMP2s, we got side by side the 88, the Eagle Speed Academy esports car. Killian Clace going up against Renee Talasinos. That's not an issue with me not being able to read names this week. It's more just the font on the readout is a little bit small for my taste. But regardless, a side-by-side battle for the LMP2s. Rene getting bested by the number 88. Looking to try and make it right back around that twin turn sim racing X-ray car. That gorgeous little, that gorgeous white and like a turquoise, kind of like an off-white turquoise kind of color. It's a really nice color. I really like that.
If you think you're seeing double, it's because you are. It's Eagle Speed Academy versus Twin Turn Sim Racing in the front of the shot and in the back of the shot. Never seen anything like this before, as the fight for P8 in class is actually making the fight for P11 in class a little bit more difficult, which is surely not what Rene Thalasinos wants, as Chris Van Gucht, with all that slipstream being thrown out by these two cars in front, is a slightly compromised line actually for Thalasinos into that final corner, may create an opportunity for Chris Van Gucht as these four cars come down the start-finish straight, absolutely line astern. That X-Ray twin turn sim racing car doesn't go for it into turn one, as look at that in the background. I think that's going to be David Sorenzo looking to get involved in this battle as well, as this becomes a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-car train, a 5-way fight for P9, and it doesn't look like it's going to give us any respite yet.
Have me wondering a little bit how much dirty air is actually impacting these cars, considering the fact that we're seeing now a 5-car train. It's noticeable that it's very easy to catch up to a pack ahead, and I mean, part of that is because if the pack ahead starts fighting, they start losing time because they're not exactly taking the optimal line through the course and trying to defend their positions. But you can also see the aggression from David Sorenzo going very, very quickly into the turn-in on the hairpin there, going through the Schumacher S's. But as I was mentioning, that dirty air could affect the amount of grip that these cars have towards the tail end. And it makes you wonder, is there going to be a situation here in the next couple minutes where these battles for position start happening, or is that dirty air really negatively impacting these cars?
Well, there could be a couple of answers to that question. Of course, these drivers do have to make a pit stop here today. It's a little bit marginal for the LMP2s on whether or not they can make it to that magic 45-minute pit window, as that is a car off on the outside of Hyundai N curve. Matthew Luke for Fury Simsport, sideways on the outside of the final corner, gets it recovered nicely. Of course, no need for a safety car in iRacing. It's not something that it throws automatically, and it's definitely not any form of trap blocker. But Matthew Luke is going to fall way to the back of this pack, and now he's given himself quite a lot of work today.
Take a look at some of the other incidents that might have been happening while we were watching that 5-way battle here. We got young Curbs and very injured-looking Jeremy DeBover right behind.
That's a wiggly car.
Whoa. Going a little bit too fast for the tow out on the rear end of the car, and it just gives way on him. I wonder if there was an event that happened earlier that might have caused that. So we've got a back bumper here. Whoa! Oh, that's a big incident for sure. Two of the Ryder Engineering Esports cars getting caught up with Jeremy DeBover. He's trying to make it through the lap as fast as possible to get back to pit lane and just car lets go on him. And then meanwhile, elsewhere, this is Matthew Luke's spin. Going in same place, going in through the same S curves. Quite aggressive through here, but the mistake is not going to happen through the S curves, but instead on the entry to the final corner. Just gets it a little bit wrong there. Probably locks up the rears just a little bit too much and spins the car around.
Yeah, these cars very aero sensitive, and a big curb on the entry to turn 15 just lifts those rear wheels up, breaks the seal to the floor, and drops the effect of the ground effect to almost zero, as that's a huge run through the Vidal chicane for Matthew Luke, who almost drives right into the back of Falco van Rysel. But now we are into, if you ask me, one of the best parts of the race. The LMP2 traffic is slowly starting to feed itself into the back of the GT3s Of course, the ones that are limping, Philip Specs, Jan Curbs, are going to be in the way of these guys a little bit quicker than the rest of the field, as this five-way fight is going to have to navigate quite a, I don't know, quite the group of GT3s, as Quaranta is going to be in that battle, as is Gus Franken. Quaranta, who was involved in that lap 1 incident at turn 2 at Canadian Tire Motorsport and effectively ended his race very soon. Everyone gets through there relatively cleanly with very few issues, as the fight is going to stay relatively close together. As we were checking through the replays though, David Soranzo has made up a position on William Alcala, and Soranzo will move up into P11 as he's now got Chris Van Gucht just in front of him, as there's an incident behind that might have involved the Pandemonium Esports driver of Quaranta. Or did Gus Franken kind of go for a bit of a spin on his own? I don't know if you call that one there, Amity.
Not so totally certain. I think I saw the results of it. Anthony Quaranta kind of going off, and then Gus Franken coming into picture. But it looks like Gus Franken, it gets a nudge from the rear end, and Quaranta just taking some evasive action there. That's all it really takes, though, for these cars. With the difference of speed and grip, all it takes is just a little nudge to send these GT cars absolutely spinning like Beyblades.
Yeah, Thomas Berlin just misjudging the closing speed at the apex of the hairpin there. I'll apologize, I was way too quick to blame Anthony Quaranta on that one. It's like they were relatively close together. But yeah, Thomas Berlin, the aggressor in that particular situation, as they are banging nose to tail into turn 1. Soranzo and Chris Van Gucht involved in quite the battle, as Dimitri Dennis of Fuelvine is just trying to squeeze his way past one of the limping Reiter engineering cars, with, I think that's going to be Luke Tunisian right on his tail, just piling on that pressure. But Tunisian just misjudges the break-in for turn 7. Rear's locking up as he has to catch that car, and Dimitri Dennis is going to get a little bit of breathing room before they reach the back of the next little bit of traffic. Dennis sets that corner up really well, but still has to check up on exit. He should be far enough back on that McLaren that he doesn't have to lift and leave himself open to an overtaking opportunity from Tunisian. We're going to have to wait and see, though, as he's going to move to the inside of the corner. The Fuelvine Racing driver goes for the gap on one of the GT3s and does make it work, as Tunisian sneaks right around the outside of, I think that's Maxime Dumoulin, who's been involved in a bit of a battle so far early on in this race. A great move from Tunisian to make sure he doesn't lose too much time to the car in front, as, oh goodness me, Diogo Teodoro side by side through the Vidal chicane with Dimitri Dennis, who I think may have got a bit of a slowdown from that. Had to give up a good chunk of time, and just like that, Luke Tunisian moves into 3rd place. A great bit of traffic management from Tunisian, and now Dimitri Dennis is on the attack.
And you saw the Diogo Teodoro flashing those lights, showing some displeasure with the rather aggressive move from Dimitri Dennis, the American driver. Very aggressive indeed, and we've seen that's resulted in a few incidents already, that kind of driving. And you know, for the most part, endurance racing is a team sport, not just in the sense that everybody's on a team, but endurance racing is also like the different classes working together to try and flow traffic through efficiently as possible without causing any incidents. So Diogo kind of letting Dimitri know that maybe that wasn't the most effective manner of getting by. Certainly more efficient, but not quite very safe. That being said, though, this is a sprint race, 90 minutes only to be able to get here, get from point A to point B. And on top of that, only solo drivers. There's only, like, everybody's on a team, but it's only one driver per car. So a little bit of a different makeup, a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive are the moves you're going to be seeing from LMP2s trying to overtake GT cars.
Yeah, so still got David Soranzo and Rene Falsinos trying to thread their way through the traffic into the Vidal chicane. sneaking around a couple of the GT3s on that back straight there. Soranzo now looking for an opportunity to get by that twin turn sim racing X-ray driver. He's going to have a good opportunity down the straight. He's got a great run out of turn 15 in that slipstream, full throttle all the way down. Is he going to he has a little bit of a peek out, but I don't think he's going to look for the move here. He does. He goes for it hard on the brakes for Soranzo. The two drivers doors and glue together. Around goes the driver of the 22 and pulls onto the track just in front of the traffic. Is lucky not to hit anyone, but a bold move for David Soranzo doesn't work out in his favor.
That is so unfortunate. That is what we in the business call Forza glue. If you play Forza, you know what I'm talking about. But here we're going to take another look at it. David Soranzo going late on the brakes, way on the inside, was almost going to make it work, but didn't quite get the car wound up nearly enough. Starts drifting out to the outside of the track. Gets almost at the rear left corner, like all caught up in the front right. And yeah, that's never a good combination there, and unfortunately a big spin for David Soranzo. A very, very daring move, unfortunately not paying off for the Simatec Sensations Legria car.
Well, it is going to give William Alcala the opportunity to move up into the top 10. So as much as he won't have been happy to see his teammate off the track at turn 1, he'll at least be grateful for the couple of positions he made up as the race for 4th in LMP2 still rages on. Clemente hanging on, not hanging on brilliantly, but following Clemente. Dimitri Dennis hanging on brilliantly at the moment, and Nelson Clemente giving it absolutely everything to get by, including the headlight flash, which works all the time, I promise. Dennis pulling to the inside very aggressively to break the draft on the start-finish straight. Nelson Clemente doesn't follow, telling him, no, I'm not going to play your games. I'm going to drive my line, and I will just overtake you on pace eventually. If we had to pick a fight that looks like it's going to continue throughout the other hour and 10 minutes of this race, it's looking like it's going to be this one. Clemente getting all forms of out of shape through turn 4, just about manages to hang on to it, but he's going to lose a little bit of time to Dennis, and he's going to try and close that gap back up. David Soranzo then has shuffled all the way back to 14th in class. So after an awful race in Motorsport that ended at turn 5, his day isn't going to get much better. He's just coming down on the brakes into turn 1. Did he go for another spin? Yeah, he did. The camber the track just falling away from him, and he's not ready for that change in balance with the damage that he's got on that car, and goes for another bit of a spin. Doesn't want to pit yet. He's still about 25 minutes outside of that pit window, but he's got to start thinking about it soon.
Very tough race for David Soranzo yet again. That was a fantastic dive into turn 1 to try and make the pass. Didn't quite work out, and now it seems like he's a bit shaken up, trying to push a little bit harder than this car can handle. That's kind of one of the biggest situations with these longer 90-minute sprint races. Trying to keep your mindset focused on driving the car and trying to forget your mistakes that you've made earlier in the race. It is so hard to try and reset your mind while you're on track, pushing as hard as you can to try and make up as many positions as possible. That little bit of desperation can be just enough to overdrive the limits of your car and cause a bit of cause even more mistakes than what it already been caused. So David Soranzo trying to deal with that as we take a look at Nelson Clemente and Dimitri Dennis currently fighting it out still for 4th position overall.
Yeah, the opportunity for Commentator just not opening itself up yet. He seems to get pretty close through sector 1, but it's in 2 and 3 where Dennis seems to have his number and opens that gap back up and leaves himself not under any sort of pressure coming into turn 1. Commentator is trying everything through all of the corners to try and set them up a little bit differently, try and change how he's getting out of the corners and see if he can build a run in some other way. Fortunately for Clemente, they do have the traffic only a couple of laps away, so as long as he can stay roughly within the slipstream of the car in front, he is going to have an opportunity to get by when they're cutting through that GT3 class once again, because that's where all of the time can be won or lost. As we always say, traffic giveth, traffic taketh away.
traffic has been a huge factor. Multi-class racing since time immemorial. Ultimate equalizer, if you will. If you're able to get through clean and quickly, then the odds will ever be in your favor. Taking a look at Miguel Almeida. P3 McLaren being followed closely behind by Federico Faria in the Ferrari in second place, and just coming into shot there was Diogo Teodoro in the Ford Mustang, currently third in GT3. So 23 minutes so far gone in the eGP of Germany here at the Nurburgring Grand Prix Strecke. I believe that was correct, right?
That was good, yeah. I think the Germans would say Grand Prix Strecke, but
yeah, well,
you're not American.
I'm very Canadian. You would expect that the French classes would have helped me roll my R's. They didn't. No, I wasn't very good at conjugating my verbs.
To be fair, German isn't about rolling the R's. It's about getting spit at the back of your throat. You know, Strecke, 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 Strecke.
Well, I'm good at that. I'm good at
to be fair, it does take a lot of practice.
Ooh,
that's...
Is that a track cut? Was that like a cut penalty?
I don't think so. These two cars are teammates. I don't know. I don't want to say Miguel Almeida's playing a bit of a game here, but is he perhaps a little bit bored and wants to go chase his teammate Federico Faria? I don't think I saw
you know what?
any slowdown penalties. I'm just
I think? I'm kind of thinking back on it. I don't think I saw him cut the corner too hard on turn one, so I don't think it's a cut penalty. I think what's actually happening is he let his teammate by so he could save fuel.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're 100% right.
Because that would make sense. It wouldn't make sense to let his teammate by because currently Diego is doing very well in the points, probably the best out of the rest of the team. Especially after his result at Mosport 2 weeks ago. So I think this is purely a pit strategy call to let the other teammate by and try and take the benefits of that draft and eat up on some of the fuel usage. It's a very smart move if that is the case, but it does seem as though Federico Faria getting a little bit away than I would be personally comfortable with if that was my plan.
Well, that's the thing. In GT3s, it's definitely something to think about because everybody in that class is on exactly the same strategy. It's a guaranteed one stop for these cars since they can go an hour on a tank of fuel. So roughly halfway through the stint, it's not a bad idea if you've got your teammate up the field with you to switch places on track and change who's the lead car to try and maximize fuel saving for both cars because so much time can be saved in the pit stop. It's a 110 litre fuel tank for these cars. They do refuel at a slightly faster rate than the prototypes, but burn fuel at a higher rate as well. So anything that you can save is worth an extra lap or so and is really going to cut down on the amount of time that you're going to be stationary in the pit stop as Dennis defends way to the inside for the Vidal chicane. Commentator looks like he's going to go for it, and there was almost a bit of contact between both of those cars. Commentator getting all forms of out of shape on the outside curb, trying to maximize his run through the final corner. Perhaps that patience meter that we've talked about so many times is starting to run out for Commentator. So keep an eye out for something a little bit dramatic down into turn one as there's fights going on just behind them as well. Kevin Peters versus Paul Taylor. They're going to go side by side into turn one. Peters much harder on the brakes than Taylor, but Taylor has the advantage of the inside line, gets out of the corner first as the places remain as they are, with Killian Claes eyeing both of those up, waiting to see if he's got an opportunity to get by.
All of a sudden, the racing tightened up quite a lot in LMP2. Everybody's starting to dart for position. We take a look a little bit further back. This is Matthew Luke, who had an incident earlier, a little bit of a spin on the final corner a few laps ago, and is now trying to make up as many positions as possible, currently being held up by William Alcala III in Twin Turn Sim Racing Aurora, the number 32 car just ahead. Meanwhile, this battle right here waging between the number 88 of Killian Claes versus Kevin Peters in the Slippers Racing Team number 399, excuse me. And then Dimitri Dennis and Nelson Clemente still having their battle that's been waging for a few laps now.
There's the opportunity.
Traffic.
Here's the opportunity. Dennis gets very blocked up behind Navarro de Bova. Clemente manages to get the exit from the corner, but was just held up a little bit more by Dennis on the exit of the turn. As Clemente is going to let's try and get past Kurawanta as they both squeeze past the Audi into the Vidal chicane. Dennis goes very deep into the final corner, keeps it on track, gets it all gathered back up, and even through all of that holds on to the position. What a great bit of driving there.
That is always the absolute worst pucker moment when you're trying to get around traffic and you've got a spot for position right ahead. Want to be aggressive to try and reduce the amount of time lost while navigating through traffic, but getting too aggressive can cause some serious problems and can send you back down the order or even off the track, as has happened for Jeremy de Bover. Jeremy de Bover officially retiring the car now. Unfortunately having a very, very unlucky event here today at Nurburgring GP.
Perhaps he needs to change his team name to Unlucky Jeremy Racing. Ooh, there's a little bit of contact between William Alcala and Anthony Quaranta. Alcala, who's been side by side with Matthew Luke on this lap, a brilliant little battle through Mercedes-Benz Arena for both of them. But Quaranta just rolled over a little bit to let Luke through into 7, but not given the same courtesy to Alcala, who basically has to push the Audi out of the way a little bit in order to try and get back onto the rear end of Matt Luke. He's still going to have a bit of slipstream down this back straight, but so is Matthew Luke. Another update on positions, though. Kevin Peters has dropped behind Killian Claes as well, who got through in that last round of traffic and is now looking to make those positions
battle for the lead
back up as the oh goodness me. So Luke Smith, who hasn't really had anyone for company in these last 2 races, is now, well, has been under a lot of pressure from newcomer Nicholas Gesner, who's actually made the move into turn 1. And it didn't look like Luke Smith fought that one too hard. He defended to the inside, but kept it fair and respectful. And we alluded to how the GT3s were saving a little bit of fuel off each other, we think. And we know how marginal it is between going 45 minutes and not, as, Luke Smith had actually built a great gap to the cars behind in the last round of traffic, goes very wide through the final corner and leaves himself completely open to attack from Nicholas Gesner, who does make it through as they're going side by side through traffic. And they're going to make it 3 wide into the Schumacher S. They are not. They slot into line. Think better of it. Survive for another day. Get through the traffic and then start fighting. Luke Smith clearly with the pace advantage at the moment, but Nicholas Gesner, knowing he's ahead, isn't going to give up this place easily, as Smith is now on the attack for the first time all season.
Some people watching may be a little bit confused by why Luke Smith did it just kind of go straight on at that corner. But I think what happened was the bottom of the car got beached up on that curb, just taking a little bit too much of that curb, and it took the front tires off the ground and basically prevented Luke Smith from being able to turn into the corner properly. So you do want to try and maximize the track, but there are some curbs that are very, very tall, and with these LMP2s being as low to the ground as they are, it is very easy to beat. So even though Luke Smith did lose a position, he's very lucky to not have permanently beached that LMP2 on top of that curb and completely ruin his race just by getting stuck on a curb.
Yeah, the Grand Prix Strecker, of course, the complete opposite to the Nurburgring Nordschleife, has flat curbs everywhere that you can run and cut and take advantage of wherever you can, as that's Jeremy de Bova back out on track, pulling to the inside to let the lead fight through. When you get to that part of the circuit, it's the bit where, oh goodness me, that's Nicholas Gesner very wide through turn 7, but that's the part of the track where it rejoins the Nordschleife, so it has very Nordschleife-ish curves as Smith looks to the inside, trying to unsettle Nicholas Gesner into turn 8, who's just focusing on his exit of the corner, as Smith just going to stay behind and look for a different opportunity later on in the lap. He's been very quick in sector 3 so far today, so I'm thinking he might just be a little bit patient here, get right underneath Gesner's rear wing and look for an opportunity at the biggest overtaking point on the track. Any guesses where that is? Yep, that's right. It's down at turn 1. So they come down this back straight once again, the Vidal chicane. Not an overtaking opportunity in these cars if you can help it. Smith is just going to sit behind for now, wait in Gesner's wheel tracks, focus on the exit of Hyundai N curve, as Gesner just goes a little bit wide to set the corner up better for exit to pick up the throttle and get a great run down the straight. But it was a very even exit from both cars. Smith 0.3 of a second or so back. Gesner defends to the inside. Smith looks to the outside, doesn't go for a move. Gesner just moves back over as he is entitled to do, but has gone a little bit deep into 1, and it's allowed Smith to just come back and sneak to the outside of turn 2, as here comes an overtaking opportunity into 3. Smith then on the inside. They're going to go side by side through Mercedes-Benz Arena. Gesner on the inside, Smith on the outside, and on that shorter line, the Writer Engineering car is going to hold on to the lead for now, but Luke Smith has not given up yet.
They're allowed to be quite aggressive here and battle for position because the nearest car behind them for position is in 3rd place, 17 seconds behind. There's a lot of time to be able to fight this out and try and make a gap, as we see Luke Smith going very late on the brakes on the inside, trying to make it stick. It will not work. Lets the position by. Probably feels a little bit bad about that one, I think. Not the way that Luke Smith wants to make that overtake. He wants to make it fair and clean, not like that kind of very aggressive late move that might have been as a result of just going on the brakes.
Well, again, we've already alluded to it once today, that patience meter, a driver that is so used to being out in front completely on his own in this championship, finally has a contender that he actually has to fight, and that patience meter seeming to drop as he stares at the back of that Writer Engineering LMP2. As Gesner deep again to set up the exit, and Smith just isn't ready for it, taking a much more traditional racing line through the corner, gets into the apex a lot quicker than Gesner, but he has to check up at that point of the corner because Gesner is going so much slower. So the difference in lines between these two drivers right now is really hampering Luke Smith's attempts at getting by.
That's one of the biggest, this is one of the most clearest examples of driving styles being so different from driver to driver. Both these drivers are very quick, pretty much the top of LMP2. And as a result, they're all, you know that they're hitting their lines, they're hitting their marks as they want to, but you can see the difference between both drivers. It seems like Nicholas Gesner trying to get the straighter exit, so taking that later apex to try and get a faster exit out of the corner and momentum onto the straightaway, whereas Luke Smith is a little bit faster into the corner, cutting to the apex earlier to try and dive into the mid-corner faster, which might result in these gaps that you're seeing forming on the straightaway because Nicholas Gesner is having a little bit more speed onto that straightaway, a little more momentum that allows him to stay ahead, just ahead enough of Luke Smith to keep him behind on the straights. So I think the only way that Luke Smith is really going to be able to make it by is through that really, really late lunge that we saw through that loose hairpin, I believe, turn 8.
Yeah, that opportunity not going to present itself for another half a lap or so now, as Smith just dives down to that apex really early once again. Gesner just focusing on hitting his marks. It's so important as the lead driver in a fight to not start to mirror drive. You have to keep your eyes out the front of the cockpit, focused on your braking, turning, throttle pickup points to make sure you're going as fast as you can and still holding off the car behind. The mirror is not, oh no, it's wide for Gesner through 2. Smith dives to the inside and makes contact with the 76 car once again, as Gesner still defends to the outside to give himself the inside for 4. But look at this line Smith has taken through 4 to set the exit up really well. As he looks to the inside, they're almost side by side through 5. They're almost going to go side by side through 6 as well. Gesner using that outside line once again to switch back to the inside for turn 7, and is gonna hold on despite making an error into turn 2.
When the skill level is this high, it just takes one mistake to almost lose a position, to have your position put at risk and on the line. but Nicholas Gessner able to keep his composure and defend the position perfectly from Luke Smith. Both these drivers absolutely ludicrously fast. We're talking about 6,100, mixed mid 6,100 I rating. These are no slouches. These are some of the fastest drivers on track, and this is exactly showing how they got that I rating so high. They are fantastic drivers, and this is a fantastic battle for first place in this race.
And it looks set to continue. It's definitely the most entertaining order that this fight for position could be in. So it's going to be one of the GT3s coming into pit for the first time. An early stop for Navarro de Vova, so perhaps repairing a little bit of damage or trying to get out in a touch of clean air. He wasn't really around anyone, but we're not focused on his pit stop right now. We are still squarely watching this fight for P1 overall between Reiter Engineering's Nicholas Gessner and Project Valorous' Luke Smith. Smith, who is looking to have a little bit of a recovery after the 8 hours of Watkins Glen, after getting into an incident in that race with one of the lap down GTPs. So perhaps looking for a touch of redemption, and it's a mistake that's put him in this position again. And that's got to be frustrating for a driver.
Absolutely. Having a frustrating event, it's very easy to take a chip off your ego and lose some of that confidence, but Smith is on an absolute tear at the current moment. But Nicholas Gessner for Reiter Engineering Esport, the number 76 car ahead of the number 55. It's probably shades of the 8 hours of Watkins Glen running through Luke Smith's head. And what really separates a good driver from a great driver is being able to put that behind you. What's done in the past is the past, and right now is happening right now. Trying to keep focused on what's happening in the moment is the key best for a great racing driver. And Luke Smith, certainly no stranger to that. I'm more than confident with an I rating like what he's got. He's been in a lot of situations. Going a little bit wide on that curb was Luke Smith, but doesn't beach it this time. As I was saying, someone with his experience is going to be familiar with these experiences, having a bad race, resetting the mind, and it looks like he's doing pretty well so far.
But here's an opportunity for Nicholas Gessner to start to try to run away a little bit, as he's built enough of a gap between him that these two are getting very different amounts of traffic at the moment. That Audi R8 GT3 forcing Luke Smith to lose a few tenths of a second through those first couple of corners, as Gessner is going to extend that lead to the biggest we've seen it since these two started fighting, of 9 tenths of a second. They've still got half a lap or so in terms of track space before they start thinking about the big group of GT3s that's out there in front of them. But for now, if Gessner can get a really good run through this middle sector, he's looking like he might start to be able to make a break for it.
Got quite a big gap at the moment. It's about a second. That's probably just about outside draft range. But now this is going to be purely on merit. Luke Smith does not have the assistance draft anymore. So Luke Smith is going to have to try and catch up to Gessner in the number 76, just purely on driver skill.
Yeah, Smith is pushing really hard, very wide through turn 11 that lap, and wide through 12 as well. You could hear the carbon fiber tub of that car scraping along the curb as he's dropped outside of slipstream even more. 1.2 seconds the gap opens up to, as Gessner's more momentum-ish down the straight line is going to help him pull away a little bit more, and Luke Smith very much chasing at the moment. So I'm just having a little bit of a peek down the rest of the field. We do have a fight developing between Taylor and Dennis for P5. He's doing a little bit of clean air with Killian Clays behind them, looking to pick up on any opportunities that he can. But a great run through the Vidal chicane for Paul Taylor, who's going to get right underneath Dennis. Dennis goes very deep into the final corner, hesitates on throttle, and these two are going to be side by side down the start-finish straight. Paul Taylor with the advantageous line down into turn 1. We've seen him defend a position like this before, but now he's going to attack with it. Deep on the brakes on the inside of the corner, gets to the apex first, moves up into P5 very cleanly. Dennis is going to be ruining that mistake.
Huge mistake from Dimitri Dennis. He's also running a pretty good race so far. But again, that's all it takes is just one mistake for a big position swap to happen. And now Paul Taylor is just running away with it. The English driver dipping into turn number 4 and 5, I believe. 7? I believe it's 6 and 7.
10-7, yeah.
It's something like that. I don't know. I'm not very good at track now. But you can see Killian Claes in the background, just lurking in the background to here, trying to catch up to Dimitri Dennis. And again, it's all about that mindset. When you make a mistake, you got to be able to reset. And it looks like, so far, Dimitri Dennis doing a pretty good job, not quite losing the draft of Paul Taylor yet, but the potential for pressure applied by the number 88 Eagle right behind, very much a potential threat.
Front of the field then, both drivers setting their fastest laps of the session. Luke Smith setting the fastest lap of the race of a 1 minute 43.020. It looks like he's got the edge in terms of outright speed as it stands, but Gesner is still the car out there in front. The gap back down to 0.7 of a second. But as we say so often, catching's one thing, passing is another. Smith, once again, on the back foot. We're around that 44-minute stage of the race. They're looking to try and get past 45 before they start thinking about pitting, but the driver's not on a fuel save. Now come down into pit lane, and they're going to be hoping for quite a long stop here, because you want to be exiting the pit lane way over 45 minutes.
Right about halfway. LMP2s to be taking a pit stop, but they can last quite a decent amount of time. Again at Nicholas Gesner and Luke Smith battling it out for the lead LMP2. Smith making a mistake earlier on in the race, beaching the car on a high curb and going wide, which allowed Nicholas Gesner to compensate. Oh my lord, what a weird incident for that Ford Mustang GT3, going through the grass and cutting the corner. As Nicholas Gesner now taking his pit stop early, that gives Luke Smith the temporary pit delta lead. Current moment. Not sure who it was that left the track there, but that was quite ludicrous there. Philip Spess.
Writer engineering, yeah.
I didn't quite get the recording of that on the incident reporter, so unfortunately I can't take a look at it. But pretty serious incident. Might have been just looking in the mirrors, worried about the eating LMP2 cars, and wasn't paying attention to the braking marker. That's a very easy mistake to make.
Strategy differences then at the front of the field. Nicholas Gesner deciding to get out of Dodge and avoid some of the traffic that it's looking like Luke Smith is going to get very, very close to. There's 5 seconds of track time between him and Maxime Dumoulin. The LMP2's roughly 10 seconds a lap or so faster than the GT3s. He has got his fingers, toes, eyes, nose, ears, mouth all crossed right now that he's going to get a little bit of luck with this GT3 traffic and catch them at an opportune moment. He will get to 2 of them on this lap, I think, and it's going to be marginal as to whether or not he gets them down into the Vidal chicane. I think the Vidal chicane is going to be probably the worst spot that he could get either of these bits of traffic, as he is praying the 550 horsepower in the back of that car is enough to get him by. It does, but it's not enough to go by Diogo Teodoro. Luke Smith is going to have to slow right down on the exit of that corner and does peel off into pit lane, keeping that time loss absolutely minimal. And now it's going to turn to the race of the pit crews. Who was faster? Is it going to be Smith or is it going to be Gesner? We're going to have to wait almost a full lap to find out the answer to that question, because Nicholas Gesner is down all the way in turn 8 as Luke Smith isn't even in his pit box yet. It's a very slow pit lane here, so you want to minimize the time you spend on pit lane. Of course, there are ways you can try and break that speed limit a little bit within the rules of iRacing. As Luke Smith is going to go up on the jacks, it will be a tire change for the 55 crew. as Gesner is hunting to try and get back to the lead of this race. The only thing standing between Reiter Engineering and getting back to the front of the field is how quick their pit stop was and how quick Luke Smith's is going to be. Through the final corner comes Gesner, just misses the apex. He's going to have a good pull of slipstream down the straight. Luke Smith has started rolling off the pit lane speed limiter. Gesner still a couple of seconds back. Who's going to be the first to the apex? It looks like it's going to be Luke Smith by over a second. So what an in-lap, what a strategy call from Project Valorous to bring Smith in a lap later than Nicholas Gesner. Take advantage of the pace that Smith has, put him in that clean air, and it's worked for them. They are back out in the lead. Project Valorous, they've only got to do 32 more minutes and they've won this race.
Fantastic pit stop and in-lap for Luke Smith. Clean, minimal time loss, nothing to deal with, no traffic to deal with. And as we saw when Nicholas Gesner was coming towards the pit lane exit, he had to deal with traffic. So now that gap has extended to about 2 seconds now that Gesner has to try and make up to catch back up to Luke Smith. But that was one of those situations where a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill opened this gap up for Luke and allows Project Valorous to extend the lead just comfortably enough. And now with just under 40 seconds to go, just over 40 seconds to go in this race.
40 seconds?
40 minutes. Did I say seconds?
You did twice.
I did. I'm very good at words and speaking. That is a thing that I'm good at. Regardless.
We get paid for this, right? We get paid to talk, and we're both very bad at it.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Meritocracy is dead. Taking a look at the weather right now. So the track conditions, 20 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, but 21 degrees on track. 61% humidity, but no forecast for precipitation today. The wind is light and breezy, 12 kilometers an hour, going towards, I believe, the southwest. And it's a little bit cloudy at the current moment. So that's our weather report at the current moment. So the track is quite cool at the moment at a nice brisk 21 degrees.
So I can't lie, I don't actually know how to read, like, you know when it says wind is northeast, I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay.
Is it
so
going to the northeast or is it coming from the northeast?
Okay, so when you see the degrees counter on the wind direction there, 260, 270 degrees means it's coming from that particular direction. So I actually spoke incorrectly. Right now, it's actually going easterly. It's going to the east. So I misspoke on that, and I apologize. But yeah, it's a easterly wind. It's going towards the east.
You know, I wanted to be a meteorologist for a little bit when I was younger. Just random fact. Yeah. Clearly never would have worked out if I can't tell what direction wind is coming from.
I just wanted access to the little pointer clicker. That's what I wanted. I didn't really care about it. I didn't really care too much about the weather. I just wanted a pointer clicker and click over the slides to the next meteorological report and just say, "Here, take a look at them. You read them. I don't wanna."
I can read a weather graph. Like, I know how to read like how intense rain is and whatever. I've kind of had to.
I do as well
for
now.
iRacing. Yeah. iRacing's taught us, and I had to learn it for a random fact, a paragliding course I did when I was 15. Didn't pass because the weather was naff. It was in South Wales. What do you expect? But yeah, the biggest takeaway I had from that entire course was, if you can see what direction the wind is going from the clouds, it's too windy to go paragliding. Anyway, back to the front of the field in GT3 as Miguel Almeida continues to lead this race, leaving absolutely no room for Michael Poole on the inside of the corner, and has now pulled a gap of 1.9 seconds on his teammate. Those two, of course, switching places potentially for a bit of fuel save earlier on in this race. Those positions now switched back as I guess Almeida decided that he'd done enough fuel save, as we are starting to approach that pit window for the GT3s. Realistically, it's been open for about half an hour or so. These cars, again, can go about an hour on a tank of fuel. So it's just a case of getting that tank empty and running as light as you can in the middle of the race to try and maximize the amount of time you're spending fast as the number 94 Ignium Motorsport car comes down pit lane. I believe that's going to be Michael Poole. A late pit stop. He did have to make a stop earlier on in this race, but that should be the last pit stop of the race for him unless something else happens out there on track. But your closest fight on the road at the moment is for P3 in GT3. It's going to be between Maxime Dumoulin and Diogo Teodoro, a driver that Dumoulin has been trying to hunt down for a very long time so far. McLaren versus Mustang. Which car is going to come out on top? So far, it's been Diogo Teodoro, but we've still got over half an hour to go in this race, and we've still got many a time of these LMP2s coming through to get this fight either closer together or separated, because that's how multi-class racing works.
Slowly but surely, Maxime Dumoulin making a little bit more pace on Diogo Teodoro we saw earlier in the race. Diogo getting involved, or almost involved rather, with some rather sketchy driving between Dimitri, excuse me, I believe it was Dimitri, I can't remember his last name, and
Dimitri
I'm trying
Dennis.
to look for him. Yes, Dimitri Dennis, and a couple other LMP2 cars trying to make some aggressive move past Diogo. And currently doing pretty well at the moment to manage that, manage the emotions. And honestly, as a GT3 driver myself, that is probably one of the most difficult things about racing in multi-class, is trying not to let the LMP2 cars, or like the faster class cars, irritate you too much. They're racing their own race, you're racing your own race, and sometimes luck just doesn't play in your favor, but it is very easy to let those situations get the best of you and let your emotions take over. So Diogo doing a pretty good job so far managing that and just staying focused.
I am now realizing that you and me are two sides of the same coin when it comes to endurance racing.
Yeah.
Prototype driver, GT3 driver.
See, that's why we're being paid money to do that. It's not because we're good at talking, it's because we have experience on two sides of the same coin. We have the experience. We're just not good with the talking bit, we're good with the experience bit and the knowing bit.
We're barely good with the experience and knowing bit because we've had an incident together.
Yeah, that was another ABN event, I believe.
Yeah. It was the Spa round of ISCC.
Yeah.
I remember it well because I'll never forget it.
Yeah, it's a very memorable event for me because that was a situation where I let my emotions get the best of me.
Yeah, you lost your poo-poo.
Yeah, I lost it on that, and I feel like a lot of that was just due to the fact that up until that point, I had a lot of bad incidents with other prototype cars.
Right.
So it really didn't matter if you were in the right or the wrong. It's just the fact that it happened is what set me off. So, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is that, like, these kinds of things happen. Sometimes there's, like, a lot of background radiation, so to speak, that just boils over and causes a whole lot of toxicity. And trying to manage that is a very important part of multi-class racing.
So, important question then. From your perspective, how do you manage that? Because it can't be easy. We always talk about how obviously the cars aren't real, the tracks aren't real, it's a lot cheaper than actually going racing, but the racing is real and it matters and it's important, and it's why we get so emotionally invested, because we practice and we set expectations for ourselves, and obviously we get disappointed when those expectations aren't met, whether that's through our own fault or through the fault of someone else's. So when you get to the point where it does boil over, how do you manage that and get that back down to a level where you can actually focus on what you're doing again?
Well, actually, it was thanks to that incident that I realized I had a bit of a problem managing my emotions. So I took some time to try and think about it and think, like, okay, so why am I getting worked up about this? Like, does this matter that much to me? Or like, is this really that important that I'm letting myself get this emotional about it, or is there something else going on? And what I eventually figured out was, like, the way that I was going into a race was that a lot of it for me was about ego. I really wanted to prove myself as a driver because I've been doing this for 10 years, and at a certain point you feel like you deserve a certain amount of success, and when you're not achieving it regularly and you're constantly trying to fight for position mid-pack, it can be very disheartening. So instead of trying to tie my ego into my racing and making it a huge problem when I wreck out or when something like that happens, I just kind of told myself, hey, I am where I am. That's like, I've been spending 10 years sim racing. If I was going to be faster, I'll be faster. I'm back at best, and that's fine. I'm an average sim racer. I'm fairly I'm better at the consistency than I am at the pace, and that's okay. And if I have a bad race, that's okay too. It doesn't, of course it would be different if I was racing for money, but I'm not. I'm not racing for money. So at the end of the day, it is ultimately, even though we are as hardcore sim racing enthusiasts, even though it does matter and that quality of racing is the best you can get, and it makes it feel very authentic and very immersive, at the end of the day, you have to remind yourself this is just a game at the end of the day.
Right. And
getting worked up about a video game is ultimately, in my eyes, it's not worth it. You're supposed to be having fun. And at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it? So that's ultimately helped me a lot ease some of my anger and frustrations, and helped me drive with a much cleaner head. And even when I get very upset, I can usually transfer that into determination rather than just letting it be full-blown rage.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, Tammy. That was a fantastic point. Thank you for taking us through that. But we've just had a little bit of drama in the fight for P5 as Michael Poole has just forced his way through, literally through Dieda de Vlaming into turn 3, sending them for a spin. Just carries way too much speed into the apex and spins the Vortex driver around and just lets Phillips pass through.
Boy.
Without so much as a fight on track. It was the closest battle on track at that point, and it was just completely ruined by the prototype traffic.
Unceremoniously ruined. Very unfortunate for D. de Vlaming. That name gives me a bit of a ring of like flamenco, flamenco music. Dancing.
I like it. It's a good vibe.
De Vlaming. I'm pretty sure that's the most incorrect way you could possibly say that. But, I'd like to be named after. Never mind. I'm not following that line of logic. I want to be named after flamenco. That sounds cool.
Flamenco. 30 minutes left in the race here at the Nurburgring Grand Prix Strecke. Project Valorous with Luke Smith on board still leads the way in LMP2 by 3 seconds from Writer Engineering's Nicholas Gesner, with Unlucky Luke Racing having a good turn of luck in this race on the bottom step of the podium in third. In GT3, it's been the story of Sonic Racing Team so far, or was the story of Sonic Racing Team so far. Miguel Almeida he's done his pit stop, hasn't he? The rest of the field haven't. That's where we're at. Federico Faria at the front of the field for Sonic Racing, his teammate having already pitted, with Replica Racing's Diogo Teodoro hunting him down as it stands. And that pit stop from Miguel Almeida has promoted Simotok Sensations' Maxime Dumoulin onto the podium for the first time. Of course, Dumoulin was hunting down Teodoro at one point to get onto the podium, but just traffic pace hasn't quite gone the way of the McLaren driver so far, as it might just require a little bit more patience and strategizing in the pit lane to try and make up the position on that Mustang.
Strategy is very important, especially in cars. Very heavy, very large gas tanks. Really emphasizes where you want to pull off your pit stop, especially sprint race like this. And now, as I mentioned it, Maxime Dumoulin going to take this opportunity to dive into the pits, currently sitting in third. Will fall back a couple positions as a result of this pit stop, but hopefully has been driving fast enough to be able to make up some pit delta and position later on in the race.
So the question then is going to be, how close does Dumoulin come out relative to your previous race leader of Miguel Almeida, who's currently down there in 5th place. That rhymed, actually. I'm a poet and I didn't quite know it. As Almeida threads his way through the Vidal chicane, through the final corner of the circuit, right onto that curb, past the hotel, the twin turbo V8 screaming as he comes down the start-finish straight as Maxime Dumoulin gets rolling. But Miguel Almeida is going to fly by, and it looks like it'll be the net lead when everything shakes out. But in LMP2, the battle for P5 has started to reignite itself a little bit. Paul Taylor and Matthew Luke are nose to tail once again. The gap 0.2 of a second as they begin their run down towards turn 8. As Luke goes for a look around the outside, springs a move on Paul Taylor, can't quite make it stick, as now these two are going to have to navigate a little bit of traffic. It's that fight for the podium we were just talking about. Diego Teodoro up there in P2 is going to check Paul Taylor up just a little bit. Taylor might have an opportunity down the inside of what used to be called Wolsteiner Curve. As he does, my God! But Diego Teodoro, apparently not aware or completely ignorant of the 0.73 behind, chooses to go for the apex after Paul Taylor comes through and almost wipes both him and Matthew Luke out of this race. As it's going to be 3 wide into Hyundai N curve.
Oh, no!
Matthew Luke is going to overcook it on the brakes into the final corner yet again, bringing a brilliant move on Paul Taylor in traffic, and he almost made it work, but adhesion, no, it's the other one. I got it the wrong way around. It's, you know what? I've completely forgotten the turn of phrase. Optimism ahead of adhesion for Matthew Luke, who outbrakes himself into Hyundai N curve and isn't going to make that move stick, as he's now got to do all that work again. The gap opens up to 3 seconds as the GT3 pit cycle is well and truly open.
First time we've seen Matthew Luke spinning at that exact corner for that exact same reason. The turn in, just the car rotating a little bit too much and getting the rear loose and gone. As we see now David Sorenzo and Killian Claes trying to get past some GT traffic to catch back up to Matthew Luke and try and capitalize on Luke's mistake there. Gonna happen for now, but Killian Claes losing a position actually to David Sorenzo, excuse me, as a result of that traffic exchange. You mentioned that was optimism ahead of adhesion.
I did get there in the end.
Yeah, you got there. A bit of a moment for Matthew Luke once again. Perhaps a learning experience that the rear of the car might have a little bit too much brake bias for very, very aggressive. What's the thing called? Now it's my turn to have a problem with words. What's the thing called when you brake while you turn?
Trail braking.
Trail braking, that's the word. Thank you. Gonna have to dial that brake bias a little bit further forward for Matthew Luke when doing some aggressive trail braking. Meanwhile, further back in the pack for, I believe this is 10th. Twin turn sim racing X-Ray and Aurora cars battling it out as we Audi R8 car of that's Anthony Caranta.
Get himself involved, yeah.
The thing is Caranta was hanging out in the back of the pack for quite a lot of this race, but throughout the pit cycles now finds himself in, I believe that's 6th or 7th. So doing a pretty good job so far.
Does it like 7th place for Anthony Caranta? Of course, a lot of losses from the GT3 field. Ooh, as that's William Alcala very wide through turn 6, right on the tail of his twin turn sim racing teammate. Manages to avoid any contact and just off the road into the gravel, thinking it's a bit of rallycross. Like, I know we're in that section of the track, but we're not racing that circuit today. Gets it all gathered up relatively well and gets it back on the road, not too far behind his teammate. So good recovery from William Alcala, but he's looking all kinds of out of rhythm right now.
Had seen a lot of mistakes like that at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park 2 weeks ago. Granted,
made
some
a
of that,
compilation of it.
yeah, granted, some of that could have been chalked up to the mixed conditions. You know, the mixed wet weather conditions catching quite a few people out, especially towards the double apex right-hander, that very famous uphill, difficult corner at CTMP. Catching a lot of people out just in terms of the slippery rubbered surface. But we saw also a lot of drivers going all four wheels off on the grass, the wet, slippery grass, and still making recovery. So a good job from the 32. Probably a learned experience from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, as I say, a brilliant recovery to get it back on the road without losing too much time, as he's almost regained all of the time he lost a lap ago. I can't tell if it's because he has the pace over Thalassinos at the moment, or maybe there's, again, a little bit of teamwork going on here to try and save these two a little bit of fuel. They don't really need to. We're way past the pit window for the GT3 at LMP2s at this point, even, as Luke Smith is at the front of the LMP2 field once again and is now cleared. Oh, goodness me, almost gets cleared out by one of the Lapper LMP2s. Just about manages to avoid that one. It's Craig Townsend, who was stationary sideways across the racing line on the exit of one. Well avoided from Luke Smith to stay out of there as Townsend goes very deep into 3, trying to recover. Let's just have a peek at what happened here then. Into turn 1, a place where we've seen a few incidents so far, especially with the LMP2s. Smith had a very good view of that the entire way and literally just has to straighten up the steering wheel, drive the car off onto that tarmac, and then crack on. But yeah, just a lazy spin for Craig Townsend and Arc Motorsport there. But again, very good recovery from a slow LMP2.
Traffic hiccup there, but now we are back to live racing here, and that is not the first time we've seen somebody spin in that exact manner through that corner. We've seen a couple drivers rip in the center of the corner as the track falls away from you. Very difficult, deceptively difficult corner. You would think such a slow speed would mitigate some of that elevation change, but most of that elevation change, yeah, fully makes it worse, because the biggest portion of that elevation change happens on the acceleration zone out of the corner. And that's where you're really asking a lot of the rear tires, and that's where a lot of that rear slip is coming from.
Yeah, we always talk about how big a drop the corkscrew is at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Of course, it's not that big a drop here, but look at the way the track just drops down there on the inside. It's literally almost like that piece of ground was never meant to have any racetrack on it. Of course, it did used to be a little right-left chicane to go onto the run between turns 4 and 5. Of course, in 2001, they changed it to the Mercedes-Benz Arena to make a slightly longer, more interesting track layout. It's certainly a controversial piece of track that not many people are fans of, but of course, it's not ran during the Nurburgring 24-hour race weekend, as they use that for truck parking for other teams to bring their cars in. So there you go.
Actually quite fascinated by that corner as well. It's a very quick right-hander and then straight into a left. Turn 1 and 2, that particular format of this circuit being essentially a chicane, kind of changes it up to make it a completely different profile. And I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's different corners, but it makes the whole track feel different. Those off-camber corners that you would avoid on that different format of a track tend to challenge the drivers in recognizing that they're not going to have the full amount of grip that they would expect through, such as, for an example, the corners that Matthew just went through with number 6 and 7. Those are on-camber corners, so your car is being pushed into the ground. When it's off-camber, like in that particular section of the track, your car is basically lifting off the ground as you're going around it. So it's very difficult to gauge how much grip your car actually has, and it requires a lot more patience than you would.
but I love it so much. It's so tricky to get set up for turn 2 as well. And then the line that you have to take through 3 is just watching Matthew Luke and Paul Taylor thread their way past one of the Ricer Engineering Mustangs. It's so much fun having to set up for 2 and carry as much speed as you can through that, because you can gain a lot of time by extending on the exit of the corner, but of course there is an off-track out there. And then the priority of turn 3 is to get set up for 4. So you take this really wide, long, arching line that takes you into the apex really, really deep. So you're basically apexing past where a traditional apex would be for a corner like that. So you can then open up turn 4 and carry as much speed through there as possible. Paul Taylor there just thinking about Matthew Luke in his mirror and trying to hold on to that position, as it's now David Soranzo in the number 22 who is waiting to look for an opportunity. As again, watch the line that Matthew Luke takes through here. It's a very slow peel away from that curb on the outside. They very slowly get themselves down to the apex of turn 3 before squeezing on the throttle, flicking the car through turn 4. And the aim really is to open it up enough so that it's completely flat through there. It's doable in the right cars, and these cars could be the right cars. They don't have much power, but they do have a lot of downforce and not much weight in them. So yeah, go flat through 4. You're guaranteeing yourself a brilliant run down to turn 6.
Right now on your screen is the closest battle on track out of both classes. It's a 3-way battle for LMP2s. Got Matthew Luke battling in the middle, sandwiched between David Soranzo in the Cimatec Sensations number 22, and Paul Taylor just ahead in the number 10 Fool's Gold Racing. Matthew Luke in the Fury 073. Going through the really fast right-hander. Almost barely even a corner in cars with this much downforce, this much mechanical grip. Heading through the fast chicane, the fast version of the chicane that Taylor and I both much more appreciate. Have a little bit more fun driving as we see Matthew Luke going a little bit too wide, getting a couple tires into the sand trap, but not losing a whole lot of time to Paul Taylor ahead.
Yeah, it might not matter as Taylor's going to just fade to the inside a little bit. Not as an actual defense, but as just a show of, come on, Luke, you're going to have to try a little bit harder than that to try and get by me, as Matthew Luke using all the curb on the inside. Deep dive on the brakes, gets right up underneath Paul Taylor's rear diffuser, and just setting up for that exit through 4 really well, using much more curb on the inside down the Fool's Gold racing car, as it looks like they're going to have a little bit of GT3 traffic to deal with here. It's going to be Maxime Dumoulin in the number 21, who's still hunting down that 3rd place, but not making much progress of it so far, as in the GT3 field, Miguel Almeida has cycled back out into the lead. Paul Taylor then slots through on Dumoulin. Matthew Luke is going to have to dive it very late, and the Frenchman is not going to be happy with that one. I'm expecting a flash of the headlights, but he neglects to do so, which I find very, very strange. But it was a must-do move for Matthew Luke there to stay in touch with Paul Taylor, as they've been dealing with this traffic to a point where they're now closing onto the back of Nelson Clemente, as Diogo Teodoro blocks the inside of Vorsteiner curve once again. They're going to go 3 wide and side by side on the run down to the Vidal chicane, and David Soranzo is going to have the run and gets out ahead, enters the chicane in P6, as it's now going to be Soranzo who's hunting down Paul Taylor. But Paul Taylor is looking up the road and he's thinking, how can I get past Nelson Clemente? But what an advantageous bit of driving from Soranzo to just mat the throttle on the exit of the corner, knowing that Matthew Luke was going to get checked up behind that Mustang, and makes up the position with absolutely no effort at all.
That was originally a 3-car battle. 5th place has now developed into a 4-car battle for 4th. Nelson Clemente now getting caught up in this mess. GT traffic now getting caught up in this mess. Paul Taylor trying to navigate it, as well as David Soranzo and Matthew Luke able to get past the Ferrari driven by Federico Faria for the Sonic Racing team, number 219. Getting done with as quickly as possible. Nelson Clemente trying to run away, get out of the slipstream. Paul Taylor right behind, trying to catch up. That's Miguel Almeida in our foreground there. Once again, inheriting after all the pit
snap
stops.
from Matt Luke. Snap at the rear end for Matthew Luke, just carrying a little bit too much speed into the final corner. Soranzo nearly makes contact with the GT3 class leader, trying to squeeze through on the Schumacher S. A little bit of drama almost thrown in there, with Matthew Luke losing yet more time and Soranzo nearly wiping out one of our race leaders.
Matthew Luke getting past our GT3 race leader.
Is that the GT3 race leader?
Yes, it is. After all the pit stops have been done and over with, that is Miguel Almeida currently.
The GT3 race leader?
Yeah.
No way, that's wild.
What?
We said it about 5 times in 30 seconds.
Oh. Well,
the fight then rages on for 5th in LMP2. It is now Soranzo versus Paul Taylor. Taylor having a completely different driver to deal with, but he's still got his eyes up the road. Nelson Clemente cannot get away from this pack of prototypes behind him, as Taylor's just going to look for a way through on Gus Franken. Franken's going to give it to him, but will he let Soranzo through? He's not going to try to, but Soranzo forces the issue yet again. There is plenty of karma coming the 22's way at the moment, and he's going to run out of luck at some point. But for now, with 11 minutes left on the clock, it's running out of opportunity. Soranzo has to get aggressive if he wants to make up these positions.
Time is running out as we see Soranzo going so deep on the brakes, so much deeper than Paul Taylor, almost getting into the back end from 3 to 4 car lengths back. David is on an absolute tear, trying as he might to get past Paul Taylor, the Fool's Gold Racing number 10, currently in 5th.
Going to get a big bout of slipstream on the way down to the Vidal chicane, but Paul Taylor's going to have the same amount of slipstream from Nelson Clemente in front. But Soranzo maximized his run out of turn 12 and is going to be closer and closer to Taylor. Taylor is really going to have to start thinking about that bright red car behind, as Paul Taylor just goes a little bit deep into Hyundai N curve. He's going to compromise his run on the exit and will defend to the inside. Soranzo follows in his wheel tracks, trying to build the speed in the slipstream, darts to the outside, tries to outbrake him. They're going to be side by side. Soranzo squeezes Paul Taylor to the inside of turn 1, and he's going to make the outside of 1 the inside for 2, as Paul Taylor's going to start thinking about the cutback into turn 3, but he doesn't quite make it. Soranzo diving to the inside to defend that one. The back end just getting loose on him a little bit, as Soranzo makes a a beautiful pass for P5, as now Paul Taylor is really going to start thinking about getting through, as he has a look on the inside of turn 6. He's not going to make it happen, but do you know what is? David Soranzo is going to make that move happen on that GT3 and give himself a little bit of breathing room to the number 10.
Anthony Caranta giving a little bit of breathing space for David Soranzo. That karma seeming to flip heads and tails on the space of a dime. David Soranzo very aggressive, late on the brakes. We've seen that that kind of move from different drivers not work out, but David Soranzo managing to make it stick, and now putting his sights directly upon Nelson Clemente, who is currently sitting in 4th, just ahead by a 1.5 seconds. Well, towards a little bit further back, fighting for, this is position 14th, a bit of a very narrow gap here between Michael Poole and Melvin Van Humeren.
And of course, Michael Poole, who we've seen in the wars a little bit, having to make one extra stop relative to the rest of the LMP2 field, getting into a couple of incidents early on in this race that's really hampered the potential result he could have got today. Poole has pace to get decent finishes here, but just can't seem to pull the race together at the moment, as he looks for a way through on Melvin Van Zumeren into the final corner. Can't make it work, but he's now going to have the benefit of slipstream all the way down the start-finish straight into that very wide turn 1. Van Zumeren is going to go back to the outside. Poole is looking to the inside for a way to get by, but no, chooses to stay behind But now, as they've got William Alcala just in front, a lap ahead for company, slicing their way through the GT3 traffic, Gus Franken getting well out of the way there. But even then, Michael Pool's going to have to fight around the outside. His car's not so good at low speed as you'd expect, as that's going to be William Alcala who's gone round. And it means Van Zumeren has had to check up just a little bit, and that comfy little gap he had over Michael Pool has been melted almost instantly.
Unfortunate incident, but we've seen William Alcala III do this before. Similar mistake, looping the car around. As we were talking, actually Thomas Burling also had a bit of an incident as well. We'll take a look at this. Burling in the Jib Racing 008. Around just about the same place and slips just about the same way, but trail braking into it. Situation where the brake by is probably set just a little bit too far back.
Yeah, it's a difficult corner down there at turn 3. Really easy to carry too much speed in and very slippery down at the apex. That little netting on the inside of the corner, not quite providing as much grip as the tarmac and the rubbered in racing line, but still it's fast to get there if you can cut it just about right, as Nelson Commentator is still holding on for 4th place at the moment. Soranzo not able to make any inroads on Clemente, but doing a great job of holding Paul Taylor behind, and has actually managed to clear him by a full 1.9 seconds. So Soranzo's luck just hasn't seemed to have run out yet, and I'm thinking that there's still going to be an opportunity for him to get into one of those top 4 places. Top 5 finish is good, but he wants to make up as many places as he can and get that 4th place back. He started up there, but an early race incident took him out of contention for the top 3 places. Luke Tunison, 18.5 seconds up the road. So an opportunity to get P4 back is going to be very enticing to Soranzo.
About the closest battle on track for the current moment. See in the sky the beautiful orange and purple hues as the sun starts setting in the sky. 5 minutes left in the race. There's not a whole lot of time left for these drivers to make up the positions they want to make up.
Hold on, Amity, there is a change of position at the bottom of LMP2 as Van Zumeren gets all sorts of checked up behind one of the GT3s in the Schumacher S. Michael Pool jumped on the opportunity to get to the right-hand side of Van Zumeren into turn 11. Couldn't quite make it stick. Both drivers go off the track, a la Max Verstappen and Lando Norris at COTA a couple of weeks ago. Pool has to settle for P14 for now, but look at the run he's got through the chicane. He's going to get side by side. They make huge contact at the apex of the final corner. Pool goes for a spin. Van Zumeren holds on, and I think that was a bit too optimistic a move from Michael Pool. A big pinch from Van Zumeren, and right rear to front left contact, so the other way around, is going to make that, well, it's going to ruin that move completely, as we get a little bit of a replay from on board. Van Zumeren very checked up through that chicane. Pool very opportunistic on the move, goes way too deep into the corner, and then that contact is all that's needed to send the Ignia Motorsport car into a spin to the outside, and it's going to be a day to forget for Michael Pool.
First, when you had laid the blame on Michael Pool, I was thinking, sure about that, but taking a look at the onboard, you could definitely see that car moving away from the inside white line that shows the track limits on the car, and that's choosing a visual marker like that easily tells you where the car behavior is settling. And Michael Pool was definitely carrying way too much speed. You're absolutely correct in your analysis. And yeah, just carrying too much speed, runs wide, straight into a quarter panel, and that's game over for Michael Pool.
And it's going to be a last of the running LMP2s for Michael Pool, as it looks like William Alcala is a late exit from this race. We saw him getting into a bit of a spin down there at turn 4, but back at the front of the field, the dominant Luke Smith has well, he's run off into the distance yet again. After getting into a good little scrap in the middle of the race there, Nicholas Gesner just sort of ran out of pace as the sun set and after that pit stop cycle. And it became Luke Smith's race to lose. He's only going to have a couple more tours of this circuit left, a couple more times to take in the sights and sounds of the Nurburgring Grand Prix Strecke. It's going to be Michael Poole who's just there in front of him on track. I don't expect him to cause too many issues. We still have a fight for position to decide. Clemente is only a second in front of David Soranzo. There's not too much traffic out there in front of them. An opportunity perhaps for one more GT3 to get involved in this fight, but ultimately it's going to come down to how fast the driver of the Simotok Sensations car can go as to whether or not he's going to be able to take fourth place off the 42.
Battle that's been brewing for about 30 minutes now between David Soranzo, Nelson Clemente, Matthew Luke, and Killian Claes, but now whittled down to just 2 for fourth. Nelson Clemente sitting in fourth position. Soranzo sitting in fifth, just behind, trying to chase down that extra position. Much needed points. Nurburgring GP proving to be a much more stable, less chaotic race this week compared to 2 weeks ago at CTMP. So far, how are you feeling about the race that we've seen?
It's certainly been entertaining. As I said, Nürburgring is one of my favorite circuits, easily. And our drivers have very much put on a great show today. Fantastic fights up and down the field as Luke Smith is going to come around the final corner to take the white flag. It will be about another minute and 43 seconds for Luke Smith to bring home the checkered and another victory on the season for Project Valorous. But just having a peek back at that fight for P4, who are about a lap and a half from the end of this race. Soranzo's managed to get the gap down to 0.7 of a second as Clemente is going to try and navigate Philip Specs. He is rough with it, goes down the inside of turn 11, which is exactly what he needed to do to try and hold on to that position, because Specs isn't just going to let Soranzo by, and that gap's going to open up to 1.3 seconds. And I think that's going to be all she wrote in the fight for P4 in LMP2. I think Luke Tunison just getting into a bit of a late incident there, maybe getting stuck behind a little bit of traffic through the chicane. In fact, realistically, I think he's probably got away with that one quite cleanly. But yeah, all eyes on the front of both of the classes right now as Miguel Almeida 6.2 seconds clear of his teammate Federico Faria, and Project Valorous' Luke Smith 10.7 clear of Nicholas Gesner's, Writer Engineering's Nicholas Gesner. A very well-run race from both of these drivers. Another well-run race from Nicholas Gesner, who took the opportunity where he could to try and topple Luke Smith. But ultimately, as the Project Valorous LMP2 comes through the final chicane and the final corner for the last time, after 90 minutes of fighting, after his lead finally coming under threat, Luke Smith is going to see everyone off and win the eGP of Germany.
Such a beautiful race won by Luke Smith. Won 2 weeks ago at CTMP, winning again tonight. Both races having a little bit of a battle here and there, but Nicholas Gesner proving himself in second place that he can fight with the top dogs. Luke Smith, a proven hero here in this series, but Nicholas Gesner certainly showing that might not be a super secure position in the future of this series, the eGP Pilot Series, as Miguel Almeida makes it across the finish line to take first for the GT class. Federico Faria, the teammate, not far behind in the Ferrari.
Yeah, it's going to make it a 1-2 finish for Sonic Racing Team. And the story of the day, yet again, is pure domination from two very talented drivers. Miguel Almeida and Luke Smith do it again. It will be those two at the top of the field yet again with as I say, the 1-2 finish. I think it's actually a 1-2-3 finish looking at it. Those are three very similarly painted liveries and three very different cars, with fourth place in LMP2's Nelson Clemente getting involved there. But yeah, great race from Miguel Almeida, great race from Luke Smith, and it's going to be very interesting in particular to talk to Smith to dissect that one, because it was looking very, very dicey for a second there.
Miguel Almeida burning it down. Getting the car spun. Diogo Teodoro also having a little bit of fun in the background. We'll take a look at the results for today's race. And what a fantastic, what a just hellacious battle to watch throughout the entire 90 minutes. Take a look through the race results. We have Project Valorous once again reigning supreme with with Luke Smith coming out on top in the LMP2 class. Ryder Engineering Esports and Nicholas Gessner finishes second, with Luke Tunison finishing in third. I believe might have actually run out of gas just crossing the finish line. Nelson Clemente in the Rubis G's by NGC number 42 coming in fourth. David Soranzo in the Simitox Sensations Lagria number 22 coming in fifth. Paul Taylor in the Fool's Gold Racing coming in sixth in the number 10 car. The number 073 of Matthew Luke for Fury Sim Sport coming in seventh. Eighth goes to Thomas Burling in the Jib Racing number 008. The 88th of Kylian Claes in the Eagle Speed Academy Esports. Number 88 finishes in ninth. 10th goes to Rene Talasinos in the Twin Turn Sim Racing X-Ray car. The number 26 of Craig Townsend in the ARC Motorsports car going 11th. Melvin Van Zumeren also ending up in 12th in the 888. Michael Poole in the Ignia Motorsport 94 finishing in 13th. William Alcala III in the Twin Turn Sim Racing Aurora car finishing in 14th. And then further down the order will be a couple more LMP2s, but let's head into the GTs.
So it's another dominant result for Miguel Almeida, who brings it home 1-2 alongside his Sonic Racing Team teammate of Federico Faria. Diego Teodoro rounds out the top three, finally breaking out into one of the podium positions. Simitox Sensations driver Maxime Dumoulin tried to get onto the podium but didn't quite have the pace to get it done, as Philip Specs for Ryder Engineering recovers to P5. Vortex Red will bring it home in sixth with Jada De Vlaming on board, and Anthony Quattarata, after a disappointing result in Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, will bring the Pandemonium Esports by SimLab Audi home in seventh in class. And the last runner of the GT3 field of Gus Franken will finish in eighth for Vortex Gold. And Alex Deiter for Slippers Racing Team, Dimitri Dennis for Fuelvine Racing, Navarro Debova for Vortex Junior, Kevin Peters for the sister Slippers Racing Team car, Chris Van Gucht for the Eagle Speed Academy Esports, and Jan Kurz for Ryder Engineering Esports Red, and Jeremy Debova for Vortex Black will be your did not finishes for tonight's event. So first up into the booth then to have a little chat about their race, interviewed by ABN's own Amity Pulsatrix, will be the winner of GT3. It's 3 on the bounce. It's Miguel Almeida.
Hello.
Miguel Almeida, the winner once again for GT3. Won last event 2 weeks ago in Canada. Heads over across the Atlantic to Germany and wins yet again. The mixed conditions couldn't throw you off your game, and here the dry couldn't throw you off your game either, though I'd be surprised if it did. So tell me, how did this race feel for you?
Yeah, pretty good. I thought I would die in first lap T1, but I'm glad I didn't. Normally it's a big mess down there, but it went well.
So, as you mentioned, you were expecting quite a lot of chaos, and we certainly did see some of that develop later in the race as the LMP2s started catching up to the GT3 cars and started lapping them. Did you find that the LMP traffic was well behaved here, or was it a little bit chaotic for your taste?
Depends. So the group in front, for example, Luke, and also the P2 guy, which I don't remember the name, it's in German, so sorry for that. But I already know them from past races, so I knew what to expect. But yeah, it was pretty rough sometimes, some close shaves, and also my teammate got some close encounters with quite a few of them, which is a bit disappointing. But at the same time, you have to predict those moments, so lifting where you can lift just to not lose that much time, and then expecting some more than brave sands, but it was good, at least for me.
Right, and 2 weeks time from now, November 13th, we're going to be running at Mugello, one of the newer additions to iRacing, but certainly more flowing tracks, fairly similar feel, in my opinion, to Nurburgring. So how do you feel you're going to be able to adjust to the Italian hillside?
Yeah, let's hope so. I only drove in that track when it came out, so certainly some way to go in testing and setup building for that, but let's see. I hope I can convert it into a win like these past races.
All right, and before we let you go, is there anybody out there that you want to thank for getting you to the top of the podium tonight here at Nurburgring GP?
Yeah, mostly to my teammate that got all the LMP2 bad luck. Without him, that would have been me. But thanks to the entire team, and yeah.
All right, that is the Miguel Almeida, the winner for GT3 class tonight here at Nurburgring GP in the Platinum eGP Pilot Series. And now I'll be handing it over to my partner, Taylor Mills, who's going to be interviewing Luke Smith, the overall winner for tonight.
I'm trying to press the buttons. It's not working. So once again then, 3 weeks in a row, it's pole position and race win for Luke Smith. Luke, it was looking a little bit dicey there in the middle of the race, turning your Dallara P217 into a skateboard at the final corner, allowing Nicholas Gesner to get through, and it's safe to say it got pretty close to costing you 3 for 3 there.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, before that, the race was definitely under control, and yeah, just one small mistake, running a little bit wide at that last chicane, and yeah, the car just, well, like you say, became a skateboard, and yeah, there was no way to stop going into the gravel there. So yeah, it wasn't ideal, but thankfully with a little bit of strategy, I was able to get track position back, and was able to use my pace in the second stint.
I'll admit, it was a pretty sick 50-50 grind. I'm going to admit, like, yeah, got your special meter up there.
Yeah, thank you.
But of course, that result comes off the back of a pretty disappointing weekend over at Watkins Glen. So after that, combined with the racing gods, giving you a little bit less grip on the exit of turn 15 there, did it almost feel like in the last week or so, someone didn't quite want you to win a race?
Yeah, there's definitely an element of that. But I decided today I wasn't going to let that happen. And I kind of knew that I had a little bit more pace than Nicholas in the first stint as well. But I kind of realized, okay, I'm doing the same pace as him, but I'm using a lot less fuel. So that's why I was able to go the lap longer. and I was then also even able to put less fuel in the pit stop to be able to regain track position and still manage the fuel to the end. But I did definitely think that there was something that kind of wanted me to not win this week. But yeah, I think the fact that it was LMP2 as well today does help me a little bit. Like, I'm not as confident in the GTPs just yet, but yeah, I mean, the fact that I'm able to kind of fight at the front in both is really promising.
So, as Amity asked not your counterpart in GT3, but certainly someone who's having a similar season to you are, next week, or in 2 weeks' time, we go to Mugello, a relatively new circuit to iRacing. We know that track can be quite harsh on tyres. So, What are you hoping for from that race?
Well, it's got to be another win. I mean, I've gone 3 for 3 now, so there's no reason why I can't make it 4 for 4, but it's certainly going to be a lot more difficult because I've done some races around Mugello in the LMP2 before, and especially when the track temperature kind of is a little bit higher, it definitely becomes a lot more difficult to manage the tyres. I mean, you're risking punctures even just at the end of a regular 30-odd lap stint, or maybe I think a bit less, but even still, like, the tyres are going to be screaming in that at that track, so that's going to be the number one thing to work on. But I'm still fairly confident that I can be fighting at the front and hopefully winning.
Well, if the track temperatures are hot, it may throw up a few different strategies which could keep the race a little bit interesting there towards the end. But once again, I feel like at this point you're running out of people to shout out, but we're still going to give the opportunity to do it anyway.
How about you guys? You do a great job of bringing the broadcast to everyone, so yeah, shout out you guys.
Thanks, Luke. That's really kind of you. 3 for 3 race winner, 3 pole positions, 3 race wins. Luke Smith looking to finish on top once again next week. Congratulations on the win, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So, another race where the story of it was pure domination in both classes. Of course, a hiccup for both drivers ended up in P2 for a moment on track, not necessarily, a pure domination even, but it was certainly surprising to see someone challenge Luke up front today. Hoping for a little bit more in the coming weeks just to keep that fight at the front of the field interesting. But Amity, what was your biggest takeaway from today's race?
My biggest takeaway is that the people who at CTMP were shining the brightest did so again today. It wasn't just the rain mixing things up or anything like that, and I hadn't been present for the opening round of Platinum eGP Pilot Series, but what today really demonstrated is the raw presence and the raw pace that the top drivers in each class has. And Miguel Almeida and Luke Smith both demonstrated they're great in the rain, and they're even better on dry circuits. So in 2 weeks' time when we head to Mugello, it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any change-up. It's a bit of a newer circuit. It hasn't been on iRacing's service as long as the other tracks on this calendar have been. So that could offer some very interesting change-ups in terms of how each driver tackles the corners, how they're tackling tire wear and fuel saving and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we also saw today Nicholas Gessner, who finished second today in LMP2, actually giving Luke Smith a fair, hard fight. It wasn't just the pit delta fight that we saw 2 weeks ago at CTMP. This was a straight-up, on merit fight, and Nicholas Gessner was really taking it to him. So Luke Smith is now going to have some pretty tough competition in the Rider Engineering Esports LMP2, that number 76, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out at Mugello.
So the Nurburgring put on a show for us tonight. The Grand Prix Strecker proving itself as a top-tier venue for motorsport, both real and virtual. Thank you very much for joining us over here in the Eifel region of Germany. We still have 4 more races to bring you from the Platinum eGP Pilot Series. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time in Mugello, hoping for a little bit of a spice up on strategy is certainly what is in the air for us. But until then, I've been Taylor Mills. It's been Amity Pulsatrix alongside me. This has been Platinum eGP Pilot Series on ABN Esports, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Good night.